All right, so install considerations. What should we think about when it comes to the actual act of installing Cognos, how we go about it, and maybe the order of operations?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm gonna preface every answer that I give here with it depends. But
That's how I can tell you're a good
like
consultant,
it's always,
Sonya.
yeah, thanks. That and I'll Google it. No, so tons to consider with this. So again, we gather all that info and we start to think about what we're gonna do. So um, the number one that comes up for us is over the top or fresh installs. So we can do over the top installs, I think all the way back to 10.2.2, maybe even 10.2.1. I wouldn't, but you could. Um, so anything new, let's say we're in 11.1.7 and we're going to 11.2.1. So, a pretty minor change. And I know the environment doesn't have a ton of customizations. I would probably do an over the top install, or at least I would do a test of it. So maybe I would take the sandbox or dev machine test, what does it look like if we do that? Um, if we have a ton of customizations, if we are going from an old version to a new version, if I don't want to interrupt the new or like the current, like let's say I don't have, when I'm doing our internal upgrades of our Cognos servers, I almost always do it over the top. I know I can take it down, get it back up again. It's not going to interrupt our kind of production world. And it's definitely the easiest way to work our way through. We don't have a ton of customizations. I can do that. If we're going like we're in the process of doing some 10.2.1s to 11.1.2s, I wouldn't do an over the top in there, especially if it's 10 years kind of out of sync. Um, I, I'm always worried if especially if we've customized files. So I have customers that have had to do some customizations of actual configuration files to get things to work. Um, those ones I really like to do um, a brand new machine if I can, even for point releases or a brand new install folder or whatever that requires. Just because if they've fixed the issue that we've had to modify the change for, I want that to flow through. I don't want to have to use a customization unless I have to. So there's a lot that goes into kind of the decision about whether we do that over the top or fresh installs. For those of you who are still 10 versions, over the top was a nightmare in the past. Even early 11s were a bit shakier. It's actually quite I would say it actually works quite well to do it over the top now on the later versions. But again, a lot of little things to think about when we're doing that. Was that just, did I answer your question?
Yes, that was great. What about dev, test, prod? Who
Yeah.
should I install first? And then, you've got the three components of kind of
Mhm.
the Cognos application: app server, content manager, and gateway. What about that? Like, should I do, the app server first, the CM first? Kind of which
Yeah.
components and which environments should go first?
Um, so again, same preface. This is not always the answer. Here's how I would look at it. Um, when I'm going to do a test of an upgrade, I really want to know where my issues are going to come from. So let's say we have a 3-tier or a 3-system environment. And so I have dev, test, prod, let's say. If dev is often at companies, dev is a single machine. So often has gateway and app servers on the same. It's an all in one box, let's say. That's not usually the one I'm going to do first, because one of the things I really need to identify when I'm doing an upgrade is I need to know, like, are we going to have communication issues between the different boxes? So I'm not going to get that with dev. If I need something to quickly show we can do it, then I might do dev first. So this is again one of those situations where you really have to figure out what the overall company situation is. But if I know that I have, let's say, communication issues that are possible. So one of the things we've been doing a lot of lately is taking on-premise servers, and then kind of recreating that environment in AWS. And so with on-premise servers, I'm pretty comfortable with making sure like we can figure out the firewalls and we know like what needs to be there. Doing all of this in AWS is really just as easy, but it does introduce that another layer of like there's a different layer of communication between the AWS instances. So in that environment, I think it's super important that we actually kind of make sure we're testing that process as well. So not just the kind of it's kind of introduced that extra layer um, of communication issues. So in that case, I would often do a test to prod first. If our real goal is prod, sometimes we start with the prod machine. Um, so, we do the prod install in a separate machine. Nobody's accessing it from there. And then it's a decision of, do is that do we just then replicate it back to QA and dev or I don't know. So there's a lot that goes into kind of which one of those installs we'll choose to do first. Um, as to what piece of the process we do first, it's almost always application content manager first. That one is the most important. We need to make sure we can talk to the content store. We need to make sure, our audit store is available. Our security goes on that level. So we also have to make sure the security is working. So if I'm going to do an install, that's the first box I start with usually is like the primary app server, content manager, options from there. That gives me a chance to test things like the content connection to the content store, the connection to security, make sure that all of that works. I can run it because we can connect to that dispatcher directly. I don't need the gateway yet. And I like kind of the instant gratification of, something clapping for me. So I want to see something working as soon as I possibly can. So that content manager app store, that's the best option because I can actually run content once I get to that point. So I like to, get that one started, make sure that's running fine, and then I'll add the other pieces to kind of that tie to that one. But that's kind of where I would go for that.
And how do you know at that point, like how do you know when you're ready to actually bring content in and start content testing? Is it when the full blown environment's built out?
So again, maybe this isn't the answer that everybody would give. I need to see it. I want to make sure that it's working. So I will often do that for first pull in. Once I have a working content store and security turned in, I may take a deployment, whether it's from dev, whether it's from prod, wherever that might be, pull it in just to make sure that I think it's working the way it is. I will say, of all of these upgrades that we've done, um, it's not super common that things don't work when we pull in that first deployment.
Yeah.
Connections don't work. We don't have the right drivers. We need to get the security figured out. Like that's the configuration stuff. The certificates are missing, that sort of thing. But the content itself has actually been pretty. I will say, it's been consistently importing fine. So I like to see that, and so I kind of I tend to do that as early as I possibly can. And it won't be the one that I'll leave in. I might even blow it completely away and bring it back in again. But I love to see that I can actually pull in the stuff that the security is there, that the content comes in. Like I'd like to know that as early as possible. So,
Yeah.
My ideal world, I pull in an app server. I build an app server. I would pull in a deployment of a backup of prod or whatever that might be. And I may still get them to blow away the content store and do it again. But at least I know immediately if it's like the basics are working. So like I said,
Gotcha.
I need applause early for that type of stuff.
Positive.
Yeah.
That's agile, right? It's just
Yes,
agile.
exactly.
That's all it is. Yeah.
That's what we'll call it.
Uh-huh.
Not my
Okay.
need for praise.